We're live.
All right. Joining us today is Greg Proops. We're assuming he's joining us today. Last we heard, he was joining us today. So I'll tell you what happened, though. You know, we had a really great time doing something that we're long overdue to do, which is just catch up. Yeah. So, you know, we ought to continue to do that until Greg shows up. Now, for our listeners, listen, Greg Proops has been on the show before. He's a pro. He's wonderful. We love him. He had a thing last time that prohibited him from showing for us, but he was contrite. And okay, fellas, I'll make it up to you. When can we reschedule? And we rescheduled for now. So, you know, he is a busy dude, and quarantine notwithstanding, he's still very much in demand. So, you know, I'm sure he'll come trailing in, and he's fine. But boy, the episode that you just finished recording, man, that was terrific. That was a lot of fun.
Henry, and look, we've had Jim DeFelice on for a number of times. There's the Lost Show with Ivan Castro, who's a blind Green Beret, but also
who challenged me to a shooting contest and was absolutely confident that he would win.
Yes.
And I was confident in his confidence.
Oh, we got Greg Prooping in here.
Yeah. There he is.
There he is. What's up, man?
Do I need to wear earplugs, or are we okay?
I think you're okay.
All right. Hey, there's Greg Proops, everybody.
Hi.
Hey, Greg, will you start us off with an intro? Just say, hey, this is Greg Proops, and you're listening to the Break It Down show.
I can't hear you. I have to go get my ear. Give me 1 second.
Okay, you do that. This is live podcasting, everybody. That's what happens.
This is what's fun about it. You know, I really dig that background he's kicking, though.
Yeah. By the way, he's got a fantastic podcast. You've listened to it, right?
Yeah. The smartest man in the world. Listen to it all the time.
Yeah, it's
subscribe to it, listen to it. The thing about that show is that it's a lot of. Hi, Greg.
Hey, Greg.
Let's see if I can get them to work now.
Okay.
Yeah. We were just waxing about your show and how fantastic it is.
And you went dark. Yeah. So if you can still hear us, Greg, you went dark. But that's okay.
Yeah. You give it a second to get everything set up. Anyhow,
you know who else
I love his show as well.
Paul Wall went dark. Anyway, that's a
Paul Wall. Now can you hear me?
Yeah. We can hear you. Can you hear us?
I can't hear you.
Oh.
Huh.
Very strange.
Yeah.
Well, that would be a good time to talk about you then.
Can you hear anything at all? No.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Again, this is what happens when you have when you're doing YouTube Live.
Yeah.
So what can you do? How about this? If Greg's unable to hear us, well, he heard us at first, so I wonder what's going on there.
I don't know.
I'm going to leave and come back.
Okay.
I can't hear you.
Yep. Yeah. It's the standard thing. The other thing that's happened a lot is the network gets crowded, whether it's your network, my network, what StreamYard, that's our service is StreamYard, what they're pushing and pulling, it gets to be crowded. And, these things just happen. So thanks for bearing with us, everybody. We will deliver. Greg is fantastic at this.
Yeah.
Talking thing.
He's good at it. Yes, Gabby, we do love tech. And especially in this climate, the thing about doing these shows during the day is that people are on during the day.
How about now, Greg? Can you hear us?
I can. It's whatever happened is better now.
Good.
Hey, so start us off. You can be as spunky as you like to be and just say something like, hey, this is Greg Proops, and you're listening to the Break It Down show.
Hey, y'all, it's Greg Proops, and you're digging the Break It Down show.
Yes, indeed. Greg Proops is a comedian, an actor, a philosopher, I say, well known for his work in improvisational comedy. Of course, you've seen him on Whose Line Is It Anyway? And if you're in your early 20s, you probably know him as Bob the Builder. Now, Pete and I and all of our friends growing up in the Bay Area, we know him, or we got to know him, became aware of him on the Alex Bennett Show. And so we've been with you ever since, Greg. And he's the host of the amazing weekly podcast, The Smartest Man in the in the world on which he espouses his copious knowledge of music, mostly music, movies, baseball, misconstrued history, comedy, arts in general. It's great. You will love it if you don't already. Greg, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, brothers. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Are you joining us from the salubrious confines of the Porpoise of Fruititude?
I am. As you can see, the porpoise is full of lively art.
Lively art indeed. We have boring backgrounds, comparatively speaking, but
Tiny elephants.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
Wow.
It's from India.
Yeah.
Also, the trinkets that he's gathered along his travels, which are
That's true.
are great and far. I really wanted
Curtailed.
to thank you for the glorious and deserved tributes that you gave to Little Richard and to Betty
Oh.
Wright.
That's very nice of you.
Yeah.
Betty Wright was, by all accounts, not just a great singing star, but she was a mentor to lots of people and beloved in the music business.
Yeah.
And they put her on TV a few years ago, which was great. I don't watch those shows, but I'm glad she got a gig on one. And Little Richard, my wife and I have been talking about it for weeks. We were thinking of even doing another tribute. The last 2 weeks we've played him and talked about him. We kind of parceled his career out over 2 shows, but watching him again, it's like his greatness can't be overstated. You know what I mean?
That's true.
He's so influential. And when he had Otis Redding at different times, Otis Redding, Jimi Hendrix, and Billy Preston in his band, as well as helping start James Brown and the Beatles and the Stones, who all opened for him.
Yeah.
And on top of which, he used to open for Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who's one of the Black women who invented rock.
And a monster guitar player.
Oh my God, she's fantastic. So his place in history is just, not to mention what everybody thought of, well, when I was a teenager in the 70s, of a rock star, which was Mick Jagger, Lou Reed, David Bowie, Tina Turner, kind of fierce, pansexual, lots of makeup, and that whole glam rock movement of the early 70s with Mark Bolan and Suzi Quatro and everybody. It's so Little Richard. I mean, there's just, he did it. He was copying a drag queen that he knew. And evidently Macon was full of that scene then, which is really exciting when you think about it. Because we were just watching Here We Are last night on HBO, which is all the guys from RuPaul's Drag Race. They go from town to town and kind of liberate these towns and get people to get up and wear drag and stuff. And I think Little Richard really is all that freedom that people enjoy now, if they, obviously times are bloody awful, but the idea of being a gender bending star kind of starts with him, because he made it popular and he sold the records. And like he said, the white kids would have Pat Boone on the shelf so that their parents didn't get mad, and then they'd play him.
Yes.
And
mentioned somebody else.
So sorry,
you mentioned somebody else that I'd love to hear your thoughts on, because when you stack up like the legends of female rock and everything, you said Suzi Quatro. People don't realize that lady has sold 60 million albums.
Suzi Quatro is huge.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're a TV fan, you remember her from I think she played Leather Toscadero on Happy
Yes, she
Days
did.
or something.
Yep.
But she was an enormous rock star in England. Right. And you were talking about Bob the Builder. We did this Bob the Builder movie years ago, and I can't remember the name. It was like Bob Goes West or something. And she played the cowgirl in it. And I wasn't in the studio with her, sadly. It was one of the few times I was in LA and she was wherever she was. But it was her voice as this, and she kind of talks like this, and I was thrilled to even be in a thing that had Suzi Quatro in it.
When you look at, like, if you were to unfairly rank like Debbie Harry, Joan Jett, Suzi Quatro, like it gets really hard to sort those ladies out. I mean, some of them are in the Hall of Fame, some are not, but I don't think that Joan Jett sold more albums than Susie Quattro has, but she doesn't have that name recognition.
I don't know. I know. I love Joan Jett. Years
Sure.
ago, Colin Mockery said that he went to see Rocky Horror on Broadway and that she played Magenta. And I was like, that's a really good call, right?
Yeah.
Because then she could, and I said, well, how was she? And he went, when she was singing, she was great. Deborah Harry, I've had occasion to, is an acquaintance of mine over the years. When I used to play Caroline's in New York, she'd come see me. And then we ended up doing a bunch of ACLU benefits together. And then we went to see her several years ago at the Hollywood Bowl with Blondie and got to have a drink with her afterward. And she is the nicest, funniest, most engaging person. She's so charming and so beautiful. And I read her book this year, and she writes me back sometimes. She's really funny. I mean, she's sassy as can be. We were at this event once, and her phone went off, and I swear to God, the phone rang, and it went, "Call me on the line." That was her ring.
What?
And she picks up her phone and she turns to me and my wife and goes, "It's my sister calling." And she knows that I'm tired of hearing that song because we've been on tour. And I fell over laughing. Yeah. Her ringtone was "Call Me."
Wow.
Yeah.
I saw her on
I know.
this recent tour. She was fantastic. She was out playing with Elvis Costello. And, it's two folks not like in their youthful prime, but putting on a hell of a show every time.
Yeah, there's a bill.
Yeah. I saw Elvis a million times in the 70s and 80s. And I was quite a fan then. I've kind of not as big a fan now just because I don't really listen to him that much anymore. Blondie, I saw a bunch of times. Me and my cousin Donnie worshipped her. And we saw her. We saw the Ramones open for Blondie in Santa Cruz in like 78. And so cut to about 10 years ago. So it would be 2008, around there. We were playing the Santa Cruz Civic with the improv group I'm in with Ryan Stiles. And I said, I saw Blondie and the Ramones here when I was a teenager. It was 40 years at least.
Yeah.
And 78, right? So I say to the stage manager, who's a woman backstage, I say, I saw Blondie and the Ramones here in 1978. And she goes, and this is what I love about Santa Cruz. That was a good show.
Yeah. That's terrific. We put on Facebook that we were going to have you on, and a friend of mine said, "Oh yeah," I can't remember what he said, but he started a conversation about how you were going to be like a whirling dervish and watch out. And we said, "Yeah, we know." The last time we had you on, we started the conversation with, "Hey, Greg, you're from San Carlos, California. What was the last show you saw at the Circle Star?" And then the next thing I said was, "All right, well, our guest today has been Greg Proops."
The Circle Star. Yeah, that was a good place. And my cousin Donnie and I also saw Cheech and Chong with Tower of Power. So Cheech and Chong.
Wow.
And they did it at Second City style, 2 folding chairs on stage. And Tommy came up and pretended to clean off a lowrider, right? Then he pretends to get in and drive, and Chong walks on stage and goes, "Hey," and he stops, picks him up, and Cheech, not Tommy. Tommy gets in with Cheech, and then he goes, "Got any weed?" And the next 10 minutes was Tommy going, "I've got," these are all 70s types of weed. "I've got mesh, I've got tie stick, I've got red, I've got lumbo, I've got gold,"
Acapulco Gold, Maui Wowie.
Yeah, those are all the strengths then, right? And now it's, Kush and strawberry vape and chocolate chip cookies and all that jazz. But in those days, it was all regional specific. And then we brought weed with us, and we smoked it indoors. No one gave a shit at that show. This was San Carlos, which is pretty square. Because when Tower Power came on, they had Lenny Pickett then.
Yeah,
he was the crazy white saxophonist.
LP, Lenny Pickett.
It's Lil Pete, and he had this giant afro that he shook around, and he had this insane dance that he did the whole time. And then he would take a gigantic solo in the middle of, whatever the Knock Yourself Out.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, the whole band, because it's CT,
right.
just everybody took a little.
Yeah, we had
still
Nick
band,
Gillette on the show. Yeah, absolutely. Still going strong. I saw him in January. I think, well, Pete was there. I don't know how much of the show he saw, but we had Mick Gillette on the show just before he passed. We actually did Mick Gillette's last interview, and we loved very dearly Mick Gillette. And he was telling us that when they found Lenny at the time was homeless.
Yeah.
And he was busking. And Mick said, "Look at this guy." And they were all like, "Oh yeah, that's," like they knew his reputation, and they were like, "We should pull him in." And so they just dragged him in to the club and put him on, and he murdered. And they were like, "Dude, you got to join the band." And now, he's now the longest running musical director that Saturday Night Live's ever had.
Right, Lenny Pickett.
Yeah.
He's been there 100 years.
Yeah.
I did not know that. I did not know that he was a homeless dude. I mean, he left the band after what? For a couple albums? He was only on. Was he there for 5-7 years?
Nah. Yeah, I don't know how many years it was, but it was just a few years.
I remember seeing him then, and then he wasn't with them the next time I saw them. And every time I saw them, they had a different lead singer.
Yeah.
Literally every time I saw them. I think they had like 8 different lead singers.
I think we've had 15 lead singers from Tower Power on our show.
When Mick Gillette passed, because Tower Power is so near and dear to me, it's really cool that you got to interview him. I played the exact part of You're Still a Young
Man. Yeah.
And Diamond Sparkling, so his solo, so that I could go, this is what Mick Gillette sounded like. Because I saw them, I think, 9 times when I was a kid.
Yeah, that flugelhorn solo in Sparkling in the Sand was... My dad was a sax player, so I grew up on, Chicago and TOP and stuff. And I actually studied with Dave Garibaldi for a while.
Really?
Yeah. So
how exciting.
It really, and grew up in Vallejo. So we have always just Tower of Power has just been part of the musical fabric. And it's the thing against which I compare practically everything else. Would this stand up to the Tower standard? And they're still going strong.
It's funny. Yeah. I've been in touch with them on Twitter because, I see the new album out, and then they tweeted me back and stuff. It's funny to me because there's people who lived on the other coast who didn't get as much Tower Power as we did.
Right.
It's hard for people to understand what a gigantic part of the Bay Area music scene they were, and how they were like at one point probably the biggest funk band in America. Maybe around Bump City.
Yeah, 74-ish. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I did a gig once with Rick Stevens, God rest his soul.
God rest his soul.
He had that terrible drug deal that went down, and he aced a couple guys, and then they put him in San Quentin, and he became a minister.
He had
a
life sentence.
Or actually,
death sentence. Huh? And then Jerry Brown commuted the death penalty. All the death penalty cases. So his death sentence turned into a life sentence that turned into his ministry work and all that stuff. We were going to have him on the show. And, just we're working on booking it. And then he passed.
Much, as merciful as God can be, he was let out and he did not die in prison. He was out and still working his ministry.
Yep.
And a friend of mine's dad owned a nightclub in San Mateo in the 70s called Groucho's. That was sort of across the tracks. And I was a dishwasher at the club a couple of times. And Rick Stevens had a band after he left Tower Power called Brass Horizons, which surprisingly sounded quite a lot like Tower Power. And I was pressed into service from the kitchen because they didn't have anyone to run the lights. So I was probably 15, and I was forced into the light booth, which was 2 or 3 switches like this. and like a fader. That was it. There wasn't no, it was a disco. So basically they had a band playing.
Right.
And so I worked the lights for them. And after the set, Rick Steves came in and you'll remember this, gave me 10.
Yeah.
We didn't high five in those days
Right.
because it was too early for high fives.
He slapped you
It
some
hadn't been
skin.
invented yet.
Yeah.
He gave me skin like that. And he went, your lights were fantastic. And I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. All I do like
let me
red,
switch it.
green, blue, red. And I remember when they closed the set, they played that classic, because it's the last call for alcohol, y'all. Like,
Yeah.
and he was a good singer.
Well,
He's the one who sings. You're still a young man, right?
yeah, he originally sang that was Lenny Williams.
Not Lenny. It's Lenny, because Lenny goes down to the nightclub, right? Or do I
think it's the other way around.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're right.
They're
both awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were working on booking Rick Stevens, and he said last time I talked to him on the phone, he said, well, I got a show coming up. I'm going to actually, Cold Blood is playing, but they're going to bring me up and I'm going to do half of the set with Cold Blood. So
really?
Yeah. So I went and I saw that show. That was the last show he did. And he was fantastic. Just had held up and was looking great and sounding great and just really strong, nailing everything. And Lydia Pence from Cold Blood, sang a couple of duets with him, and they were just as powerful as ever. And it was so good to see that.
Your stories are awesome. That is just fantastic. It's really, really amazing. And again, another people, East Coasters, Cold Blood was a major funk outfit.
Oh yeah.
We had Graham Central Station, we had Frankie Beverly, we had Cold Blood, Tower Power.
Yeah.
War was from San Jose. They're still a band as far as
Sly
I
and
know.
the Family Stone. We just had Guerrero from Sly and the Family Stone on last week. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's holding up great. He looks fantastic, man. I really just have such fondness for him. And then to see him, when he came on the show, just like you did, the screen comes up and he appears. And I was like, Greg, you look terrific. He's just been taking great care of himself. And it was, it's just really nice to see because we're all,
I love your bookings.
Not getting younger.
Thanks, man.
No.
Yeah. So thank you. You're in good company.
Yeah, no kidding, man. I think last week someone said online, who's the greatest band? Michael McKean's ever put it out. And I said that Sly and the Family Stone is the greatest American band. And, the great American rock band is Aerosmith. And of course, everybody jumps up your ass the minute you say something like that.
Yeah.
But that's the fun of the fun of the pandemic is that we're all sitting around thinking of our favorite music.
I was in that thread with you and
debating it.
We were talking about it. Yeah, because Sly Stone, and this is what I say about Sly Stone was copied by the icons who were copied by the icons who copied the icons. He is the spark.
All the way down to Drake.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
There is no modern music without Sly Stone. He's all over it. And the whole band is incredible. And the idea, like he said, I purposely went out and grabbed these different people, hippies and everything. I wanted to bring this collection of people together because that's what he was about. Mm-hmm. And we can all still learn some lessons from that.
Right?
Yep.
It's a polyracial, multisexual, rock funk outfit that sang about racism and positivity.
Yep.
And dancing and sex. And I like some of the obscure ones too, like Somebody's Watching You, which is my alarm on my phone. My ringtone is Hollywood
wake up to that?
Because
of course. Here. Yeah.
But my alarm is Somebody's Watching You by Sly and the Family Stone.
That's
I love
good.
Running Away.
Uh-huh.
And what's the other one that Jennifer always plays? Oh, Jennifer loves Running Away, but I love Family Affair. And if you want me to stay, some of the later, weirder stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that was the dawn of using a drum machine too.
Right? I just think his voice he's just everything to me. They're the most exciting. They're the most fun. They're the funkiest. Janet Jackson would never have had the giant hit that she had without Am I wearing these right? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Without Sly.
Yeah.
Greg Erica, man. So Cynthia passed a couple years ago. Sly's still around.
He is still
Sly
around.
around.
He was our 100th episode.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. What a
Yeah,
great
and
rookie.
man, we were so lucky because he doesn't talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Right?
And he only has so much time in him too before like his brain kind of disappears.
Yeah.
So we got about literally like 22 useful minutes out of but what we did is we didn't talk about like all of the problems. We celebrated who he was and his impact on particularly Bay Area music. And it's just such a fantastic show. It's
You
great.
talked to Sly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
oh my God.
so we didn't have an hour worth of material with Sly, but what we did was we went out to a bunch of Bay Area musicians and said, what was Sly to you? And so we would talk, and we cut it such that we would talk to Sly, and then he would say something, and then we would bring on like Johnny Cola from Huey Lewis and the News, and he would say, here's what happened with me and Sly. Or we would bring on Dave Agent from Sacramento, and he would say, here's why Sly was so important. And that ended up being the fun part. It was a lot of editing work, but it was it was all worth it. The other thing about that entire movement was that it was so uniquely Bay Area, and it gave us. There's a lot of, when you're talking about local acts, there's a lot to be proud of, and specifically being a drummer and having Greg Erico on. There's a funk secret handshake for me. Whenever somebody talks about how much they love the funk, I just sort of sideways whisper Betty Davis. And most people have never heard the Betty Davis records, but he produced the very first Betty Davis record. Betty Davis was a funk singer who was married to, her name was Betty something else, but she married Miles Davis for about 6 months, and she just kept Davis. But her records were so doggone funky, so funky. And so, a lot of times I'll just throw it out there and
see if they know
and see. See who gets excited. I want to acknowledge Jennifer though, because, you're the smartest man in the world with the Smartest Man in the World podcast that everybody should subscribe to. But the old saying, behind every smartest man in the world, there's the smartest woman in the world who can go toe to toe.
She's much smarter than I am. And her taste in music is just superb. This virus has devastated a lot of older jazz musicians because it's really a disease that affects people of color really heavily. And so a bunch of cats have died in the last month, including Wynton Marsalis's dad, Ellis, who was a brilliant pianist, and Henry Grimes. And, some of them were really, really old, but they might not have died so soon if this hadn't happened. In any case, she stays on top of this and really goes deep dive into their music. And we have long discussions where I just learn everything about it from her. And of course, Little Richard's a particular favorite of hers and always was. He's so, I thank you for saying that, because we do the podcast together now, mostly because what else can we do?
Right.
I've had a lot of operations in the last year that I couldn't get out as much to do the podcast live. And I think having Jennifer come on as, as a full-fledged podcaster, as opposed to just telling me, setting the agenda with me. The show was always her, baby, because the agenda of history, feminism, music, drugs, art, and all that is driven by her. But I've loved having her be on every week because it's so much fun. We just sit here and play record. Basically, now it's turned into kind of a house party where we play
listening party,
about jazz. And
did you guys get into the passing of Fabian Schneider from Kraftwerk at all yet?
Yeah, we did an episode 2 weeks ago. See, Jennifer's an expert on electronica, and so we played Kraftwerk and. Also,
without David Bowie,
right? Also, another a gay star from Europe who had a Spanish name who was in a techno band. He passed away too. So, and what's his name from the Stranglers also passed away. So that was a very new wave electronica episode. And when you talk about electronica, it leads you right to house. and the symbiosis between house and electronica, and then that leads you to techno and dance, and then that leads you to trap, and
Drum and
so
bass. Yeah.
yeah, all of it's such
It's intertwined.
it had to start somewhere, and it started in the late 60s, early 70s in Detroit and Germany.
Yeah.
And then became
Simultaneously.
this, right. When I lived in England in the 90s, there was all these bands like Oasis and shit like that, but the biggest music was house. Like, that's what people just fucking went crazy. They had giant gatherings, and everybody takes, ecstasy and whatnot. And I think when they started it, I think they had no idea that house would become like the world's most popular music for a while,
Yeah, it's really, if you start a movement that becomes the world's most popular music, it's organically such that you shouldn't know it. If you knew it, it's not
Right?
It's not going to catch on. So
no, I think they were doing what they wanted to do, and I think Crawford had a superb sense of humor. The album covers and the way they presented themselves, and I'm friends with a cat named Nick Franklin, and Nick Franklin was in an outfit called Lemon Jelly, and they're like an ambient disco, techno kind of feel, and he's worked with lots of different artists like John Cale, who's post Velvet Underground stuff has been everything from symphonies to giant pieces to rock, and he's really eclectic. And Nick's music's really, if you've never heard of it, you could spin Lemon Jelly. It's also very fanciful and kind of humorous. John Cale we saw several years ago at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, 2 nights. Jennifer's a huge fan of his, and one night we went, and it was a tribute to Nico, who was the singer with the Velvet Underground. It was sort of a German chanteuse. She sang like this, sort of other people's parties, and they had all these hip acts come on and sing her songs. And John Cale was kind of the musical director, right? So they had, I'm blanking on her name, Sonic Youth, the bass player from Sonic Youth. Anyway, she was there, and Alice the Policewoman, and Peaches. You've heard of Peaches, and Peaches speaks German, so she sang in German, which was really impressive. And I met Peaches later at a Lucha Vavoom thing down here in LA, which is Mexican wrestling and burlesque. And Peaches is about 3 feet tall and absolutely fearless. She got on this goddamn rig, and it's in a proper boxing rig, right? Like they've set up a giant boxing ring, and they have midgets and drag queens, and it's really fun. And in between the wrestling matches, and they have proper. It's in between the wrestling matches, they have burlesque. So some of the burlesque are women, some is men, and fucking Peaches got in this rig, and they hoisted her above this boxing ring, like 75 feet in the sky, in the gods, right? And then she came down singing, and I was like, "You're out of your fucking mind." She didn't have a harness on, like that's just. And I said to her though, she was wearing this insane outfit and her hair straight up. I go, I saw you at the Brooklyn Academy at the Nico tribute. And she's like, "Oh my God," because that's like that's pretty arty, arty, the Brooklyn Academy of Music. You definitely have a glass of wine, and it's a proper music thing, like not a rock and roll club. But that's the beauty of Peaches, is that not only is she the dirtiest songwriter in the world, she could hip it up and sing a couple Nico songs in German while playing a harmonium, right?
Wow.
So it was eclectic, to say the least. And John Cale's just a superb artist, completely in control. And, a decided symphonic feel the second night. He played a thing he'd written called Paris 1919, and then a bunch of other material. So cut to, we're in Wales a couple of years ago for a book festival, and we went to not Swansea, Cardiff. Cardiff's the capital of Wales, and John Cale is Welsh. There's about 5 famous Welsh people. Tom Jones.
Tom Jones, yeah. That's it for me. That's all I got.
Yeah, and Shirley
Bob
Bassey.
Welch, the pitcher from the Dodgers. Bob Welch.
Mhm.
No.
No.
Shirley Bassey's Welsh.
Okay.
Anthony Hopkins is Welsh.
Okay.
The actor Michael Sheen is Welsh. And Michael Sheen played David Frost in the Frost Nixon movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was in that HBO thing about the Kinsey report and everything. And Charlotte Church, who was a teenage singer, who was famous when she was like 13. She's Welsh. Hey, we went to this concert in Wales, and we went backstage after, and Charlotte Church sang in the show with John Cale, and Michael Sheen got up and did a poem to his music. Like he recited Dylan Thomas, who's another famous Welsh person. So it was like every famous Welsh person in one room.
Right.
Charlotte Church was wearing glitter and had no shoes on. And I said, "Do you live in London?" And she went, "Fuck no, I live in Cardiff, mate." And
right on. Way to represent.
She stayed in Wales, and she is a big activist, like a real political person. And as you know, politics in England, like here, have taken a decided downturn the last few years.
Yeah.
And the point of the story is I met her when she was 13 in 1997 because I was asked to do stand-up at Prince Charles's 50th birthday party.
Holy cow.
No kidding.
So it was me, a couple other comedians. Tommy Tiernan was one, who's an Irish cat who I know for a long time. And Ginger Spice sang Happy Birthday.
Okay.
Joan Collins was there. Robbie Williams did a number, and they got the guy who used to play Q in the Bond films, Desmond Llewellyn. The old, the one who go, "Pay attention."
I love all of these people. This is a great lineup.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Elle Macpherson. I was in a dressing room with Rowan Atkinson, Stephen Fry, Mel Smith, Vinnie Jones, the footballer, Griff Rhys Jones, the comedian, also Welsh, and they were smoking and drinking, and it was great. And Vinnie Jones came in, and Vinnie Jones was in like a bunch of gangster movies in the early 2000s, right, and 90s. He had been a footballer, so he's a big cat with a flat nose.
Yeah,
He's been famous for biting a dude's ear almost off in a match, right? So fantastically, my wife showed up later in the day. We've been rehearsing all day, and Peter Ustinov was there.
Wow.
who played the Roman Emperor Nero in the movie Quo Vadis in like 1950. You know what I mean? It was crazy, and it was a really fun day.
What a disparate crew! Holy cow!
Right? It was
Robbie Williams to Peter Ustinov.
Robbie Williams, yeah. And Ginger Spice went, "Happy birthday, Prince Charles!" Right? Like she was in like a Maryland outfit.
How topical!
And
good job, Jerry.
Yeah.
I did not bow, by the way.
Oh,
because I'm American.
Yeah,
that's right.
You don't have to
they
bow.
all
You're a
bowed
Yank. Sure.
To the royal box, and I
gave the nod. What's up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're not going to believe this. The rest of this, Roger Moore is there.
What?
Yes, and George Martin.
Wow. Those two don't surprise me, but just
George Martin had made Charlotte Church's first record. She was a teenage phenomenon. Man. She was 13, so he was there with Charlotte Church, and
way to tie it all up. By the way,
right? He came up to me and he goes, "Hello, I'm George," and I'm like,
"No shit."
Yeah. So I walked up to Roger Moore and went, "Hi, Roger Moore. I'm Greg," and he went and just gave me nothing. Right? Yeah, he totally gave me the frosty paw. So at the end
whatever,
of the show,
he's my least favorite James Bond anyway.
Right? Well, yeah.
He is
at
now.
The end of this, George Lazenby. At the end of the
that's
show,
the one.
Although Roger Moore was, when Audrey Hepburn, before she died, she was like this major spokesman for UNICEF, right? She went around the world,
Yeah.
looked after starving children, tried to drum up money for charity. She was really a beautiful person that way.
Mhm.
And she was mates with Roger Moore. And before she died, she said, Roger, would you take over my position? So he had to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He couldn't just go, oh, no, Roger, I don't want to do that. He, of course,
You
not,
don't
I'll
say,
do it. And then
you don't say no.
he,
So he
not to
became the
that.
spokesperson of UNESCO.
Yeah, he worked for UNICEF for years.
Or UNICEF.
So at the end of the show, we all lined up, and the prince came on stage. And this was with his first year with his new wife,
Camilla. Yeah.
Camilla. Thank you, Camilla Parker Bowles. She was there. In fact, it might have been the first public outing where they were both together.
Wow.
And so he came up to everybody and shook their hand. I was behind Joan Collins, and I could have grabbed her. She was tiny and perfectly formed. And Prince Charles got to me, and his people skills, because
he's a
all
polished
he's ever
prince.
done, is be, suave with people. So he wasn't that tall, 5'9", 5'10". He took my hand like that and pulled me in and went, "Did you come here just for this? Thank you so much. Did you come here just for this?" And I went, I did. And he went, "Where are you staying?" And I thought like he was going to ask me to go back with him,
Yeah.
because it was so intimate the way he said it. He
Yeah.
went, where are you staying? And I went, I'm staying with friend house. Like,
At the
I
Westin?
yeah, right. That's how he does it though. Like when you're talking to him, his focus, right?
Yeah.
You're
the most important
amazing.
person there for that moment.
I've never met anyone else who had that kind of was able to do that with every single person he spoke to. And
What a
very, very
great
often,
thing to be good at, though.
right?
Yeah.
Just
Oh,
pure
man.
personality. Like when Nelson Mandela was released from prison and he came to London. If you've ever been to London, in Trafalgar Square, there's the giant pillars and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But on each side of the square is all the places that speak to Britain's hideous empire, right? Australia House, Oceania House, all their colonies, right? And then on one side of the square, South Africa House. And in front of South Africa House, for a million years, for the whole time Nelson Mandela was incarcerated, there was a vigil, right? A vigil for Nelson Mandela. And so when he finally came to London, the vigil stopped, and Jennifer went to see him walk through the square, and he walked down the Pall Mall, and the streets were lined with people, millions of people, black people, white people, people from America, everybody. And Charles was with him, was with Nelson Mandela. And Charles completely stepped back and let Nelson Mandela go right out in front. And Nelson Mandela was 6'7". It was giant.
Huh.
Wow.
Went into the crowd and was shaking hands with people, and people were, and he was dancing. And I didn't get to see that one, but Jennifer saw it, and she said, one, that Nelson Mandela was amazing and unbelievably charismatic and tall, quite old by the time he got let out of prison.
Yeah.
But that Charles couldn't have been more, happy to stay out of the spotlight, let the other person have the day. Something that we don't see much anymore from leaders.
No kidding. His
A sense of
job since he was a
graciousness.
little kid was to be that gracious and to be the best example of behavior.
He
You're
may never
right.
be king.
It's tough. It's tough. I miss that so much. That amount of poise in our leadership.
Well, watching Obama last week on TV was pretty emotional. I started crying. I've never seen him speak in person, but I watched him on TV, of course. But the greatest speakers
He's pretty good at it.
Oh my God, he's good on the stump.
Yeah.
And also, the exact opposite of now.
Yep.
When the press would ask him a question, he didn't answer right away. He'd think about it.
He'd think about it.
He'd think. Then he'd give a measured, judicious, calm, adult, reasoned response with no rancor. He never yelled at anyone. He never called a reporter a pig or anything. I've seen Bill Clinton speak. I've seen Hillary Clinton speak. Jesse Jackson was galvanizing. When he ran for president, he came to San Francisco this was the second time in '88. And it was at Fillmore and Webster, right?
Mm-hmm.
That little park there. And Willie Brown was his campaign manager. And Jesse Jackson was in full declamatory mode, right? He was whipping the crowd into a frenzy because his slogan, as you recall, was "Keep Hope Alive." And because we were in the middle of the Reagan Bush years, and it was just like now, a complete shit show. And Willie Brown got up, came late to the event, and walked up on the stage in the middle of the speech. And Jesse Jackson stopped, and they gave each other high fives, and they hugged, and they snugged. And then he went and sat down behind him. And Jesse Jackson went, "I can stop in the middle of my speech to say hello to my campaign manager, unlike Dan Quayle, because I know where I am and what I'm talking about."
Right. He can't stop to write a word on a chalkboard.
Right. He picked it up right from where he left off. I also saw Geraldine Ferraro speak in 1984 when she was running for vice president.
Yeah. So let's talk about your top 3 or 4 or 5, because your oratory skills are evident. For people who don't listen to the Smartest Man in the World podcast, you should. That's where you'll see them. Especially if you go back to episodes that you've done live in a room on the road where it's just you and a microphone and a little bit of reaction. And you're playing off of the reaction, but it's not like you're there doing crowd work. It's different. You have the ability to captivate an audience and then to take them for a ride. And I love the way you double down on something, even if it's just a little minuscule thing, even if you misspeak. Is this a calculated, measured thing for you where you just go down the rabbit hole? You know, if you're going to trip and fall, just go down the rabbit hole. Come with me, everybody. Is that a technique?
It was, thank you for asking that. It was completely organic. When we started doing it, and it's been 10 years now, or it will be 10 years in the autumn.
Wow.
I didn't know what I was going to do. And we did the first live show over a little place in West Hollywood called Bar Lubitsch. And I got up and started spieling, right? And after the first show, Jennifer went, "This is what you need to be doing, because this is the strongest, medium for you." When I agreed with her, because it's always important to take good advice. So I found that when I was speaking, I would make mistakes. And rather than try to correct them or edit them out, I would just repeat the mistake and then keep going down it, like you say, and then trying to deconstruct it and make something out of it.
Yeah.
And that became a technique. Then I was able to follow that. And my 2 favorite quotes are, what does Leonard Cohen say? "Forget your perfect world. Cracks are where the light shines through."
Yeah.
Right? You make something, you want it to be perfect. Part of all of our problem, you're a musician, part of all of our problem is you want it to be a perfect thing, like a Ming vase. And it isn't. Performing has mistakes. Writing has mistakes. A book has everything, and I think you have to embrace that. In my opinion, what I do, that's how I do it.
Mm-hmm.
You're walking down a road backwards. You're falling into a hole. You're trying to. I saw Ornette Coleman with Jennifer years ago at UCLA, and Ornette Coleman played free jazz. So
Right.
I don't know that it was composition as much as collaboration and improvisation. He came out with his son on drums, 3 bass players. You love this configuration, man.
Yeah.
His son on drums, 3 bass players, one on electric, one on stand-up, one on another kind of bass. And he came out, I don't know if you know Ornette Coleman, but he played this tiny plastic saxophone. It was this little white affair. And he came out like this. And I thought, oh my, are you okay? Sat down and they just started to go. And it wasn't melodious. It wasn't harmonious, but it wasn't, it was you know what I mean? I don't know how to describe for you.
It was like a Jackson Pollock.
Yeah, it was just, but the vibration of it and the majesty of what was going on and the immensity of the groove, because it wasn't a groove like a funky groove at all. It was defying jazz, but like all of the free jazz artists were taking what they perceived as the tyranny of having to play standards
structure
and the structure exactly. So, but within the music and without the structure, it became exultant. And at the end of the first number, which was this 3 basses and him blatting away on this little plastic sax and the drummer drumming like mad. At the end of the first number, the whole place went, and then started applauding. But there was this, like 3,000 people in Royce Hall, a sharp intake of breath. Like you couldn't believe it. There was this release. And I remember after reading an interview with Ornette Coleman, and someone asked him, what are you trying to do on stage? And he said, teach, which I thought was like, I saw Sonny Rollins there. And Sonny Rollins was in an Afro-Cuban bag that night. And by the end of the night, everybody was dancing. A jazz concert, right? Because it was just, and I saw Keith, who's the piano player with the huge ego?
Oh, boy.
Keith Jarrett.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Keith Jarrett's a magnificent musician. He's a classical musician. On stage, he's an asshole. Like he's really an asshole. Like he had no personality. It was awful. It was right after 9/11, and he goes, yeah, we came from New York. We can never fucking get back there. And you're like, dude, we're all trying to not think about it. It was like 3 days after 9/11.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The country completely traumatized, and he's acting like a dick. So all these different people bring all these different things to it. Like Sonny Rollins gave an article in the New York Times the other day. He's still alive, where he's talking about the immortality of music and how basically he's saying like Bach and Beethoven existed before they wrote their music, that music is this collective unconscious and that you're trying to improvise off the top of it. It was really profound. If you get a chance, go back and look up Sonny Rollins a few days ago from the New York Times. The foreign papers have it free, then you don't have to go through the paywall at the New York Times. But the reason I'm bringing up those people is I try to look at the comedy like that.
So are you more of a Sonny Rollins?
Sorry?
Because Sonny Rollins is more, he's groovy. He taps into that groove more than Ornette Coleman, who is just completely free. Yeah. Where do you sit, you think, on the spectrum?
I'd like to say somewhere in between. I believe that a small amount of structure allows you a jumping off point. So that's why I always had notes and a place to start with the podcast. And then I also believe that letting yourself go and letting your ego go makes you funnier. I on stage when I'm doing stand-up, I browbeat the audience into submission. I accept no heckling. I accept no dissent.
Yeah.
If you have a different opinion than me, I don't care about it because I have the mic.
Yep. People didn't come to see that. They didn't come to see that opinion. They came to see yours.
Yeah. As I was saying, you're entitled to my opinion. And
you pay good money for it.
Right. This isn't a theory. This is the fact I thought of. So I was listening to the last album I recorded back, which hasn't come out yet because I'm being inconceivably lazy in lockdown. And someone tries to kind of test me on something at one point, and I just mercilessly berate them into the ground. And I would never do any of that at the podcast. There's only one episode of the podcast where a drunk asshole came and started to try to heckle me. And I shot him down pretty hard, but I also did it by going, you're really exposing yourself right now. You're really vulnerable. Ooh. You're being very childish, and you're trying to make this about this and that. And I can see where all your pain is. And he, because I didn't go, hey, you fucking nipple prick bug fucker, all fucking, I didn't do any of that abusive stuff. I just turned it around on him and I went, I can see you've got a real issue, and he shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden it's about your problem, So I like to think when we could do it live, people bring me gifts, and I have so many books and records and pieces of art and paintings and poetry and drugs and alcohol and that people gave me because
that's work if you can get it.
Right? The generosity of spirit of the audience is the most beautiful thing. Your music, like I said, you guys know this. connecting with the audience is what it's all supposed to be about, whether you're Ornette Coleman or Deborah Harry or Sonny Rollins. And a lot of times I'd have a bunch of stuff planned to talk about, and then someone would give me a book or a pack of baseball cards or something, and I'd go off. I'd just pick up the book or the cards, and that would lead me to another thing. That would lead me to another thing. That would lead me to another thing. And I never, I sometimes got back to the point and sometimes not. And so that's how I look at it. I want to, how like a hummingbird goes backwards and forwards and flies up and down, but a butterfly flies sort of like you don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
I think the butterfly is the one who
got it dialed in. Well, somebody gives you a piece of artwork or something, and then you go off on a story. They will have that the rest of their lives. So I will counter by saying, for everything that somebody's given you, you have given them some gem that they'll take with them that will make them interesting for the rest of whomever they run into.
That's very, very sweet of you. I really appreciate that. I'm doing a podcast live, like we are doing one on the 30th, on a thing called the Nowhere Comedy Club. You can look it up, or you can go to my website, gregproops.com. And it's been a savior, I think, for a lot of us. This club, Steve Hofstetter and Ben Glebe put it together, and you can watch comics perform live at home on your telephone or your computer, and you can be seen as well. We can see you, which makes it perfectly interactive. You can hear the laughter.
Yeah, that's everything.
You hear people's dogs bark, and people perform at home. Like holding it. Hi, how are you? Like holding it. I used a hairbrush and a spatula. A spoon. They can drink at their own house, and you play live to them. And so I've done a couple shows. I did a stand-up show, and then I did an improv show with Glebe. Glebe and I just riffed, and then we did some Who's Line games. And so I'm doing a podcast at the end of the month, and I'm thinking about going into the vast storehouse of stuff people have given me over the years, and just showing it to people, because I think I have paintings of Satchel Paige. I have a beautiful engraving of Sean Connery and Michael Caine from The Man Who Would Be King that a guy did for me. I have a ring a guy made out of a quarter from the year I was born, 1873. Just, I can't tell you how profound it is to me, the things people give me. And I think some of the handmade things I was thinking about, now you've convinced me to show them, because I don't know that they've gotten a visual airing. No one's ever seen anything, because it's always been a podcast, but now you'll be able to see it. So anyway, that was a long way of saying that I appreciate everyone who listens to my show. And I think I am going to bring out a couple of the tchotchkes, because they're pretty amazing. Someone made a little car and put a Kittens McTavish in it. We have a mascot called Kittens McTavish on the show. I have 1,000 different Kittens McTavishes, and we also have another thing on the show called the elusive ephemeral emotional support Moonjack, which I didn't make up any of these things. I improvised them on the night, and they became part of the whole show, and people remember them. And that's the beauty of doing it organically. There was a weird barking noise one night at a venue we were playing, what used to be the UCB over on. So I'm pointing this way to orient you. And in the middle of the show, I heard whoop, whoop. No one knows what it was. I think it was someone pushing their chair back, and it scraped on the floor. And I said, "Do you guys hear that? It's the elusive, ephemeral, emotional support Moonjack. A Moonjack is a tiny deer that barks." And somehow that caught on with everybody. So I have paintings of Moonjacks. People send me Moonjack dolls. I have a woven Moonjack. I have an embroidery, because the Moonjack slogan is based on a thing a friend of ours gave Jennifer years ago. I support you in everything you do. So improvising all those things has led to a lot of stuff. People embrace it, and then you've gotten through to them.
Yeah, and they spend time making those gifts.
I'm sure Greg Erko or Rick Stevens would say to you that the most profound thing is knowing how much the audience is there for you.
Yeah.
Quentin Crisp was a very outspoken and flamboyant gay man from England, and he was out way before anyone was out. And he, there was a movie about his life called The Naked Civil Servant with John Hurt playing him, and he was very funny, and he was an astute social critic as well as being a wit and whatnot. And he said two things that I have never forgotten. One of which was, you know how you have friends and they go, yeah, you know, I'm gonna start a band, man, or I'm gonna write a book or whatever, and they never, you know, they're never gonna do it.
Never do. Yeah.
And they keep telling everybody they're one thing and they're another thing. Quentin Crisp said, you can't be a pig farmer for 30 years and tell everyone you're a violinist. And which puts an end to it. Because I you get people who come up to you and go, man, I've done stand-up a couple times, but I don't know how you guys do it. And you're like, I don't know why you're telling me this. I didn't tell you about all my unsuccessful attempts to be an airline pilot or whatever.
Right.
And then the other thing is Marlene Dietrich, when she was older and wasn't in pictures as much, took her act on the road and did a cabaret act, right, with a piano player, and she sang songs. And you remember Marlene Dietrich's voice. She also sang like Nico. And she wore like a full body suit under her suit to keep her in,
Stuff together.
And, she did the old-fashioned facelift, which was you take your hair and you tie it back as hard as humanly possible so that your skin is taut, and then you put your wig over that. And then she talked about old times and Gary Cooper, and she'd sing a song and she'd smoke a cigarette and then talk about this movie, that movie. And Quentin Crisp said her show wasn't about the singing and the stories. It was about applause. He said, when she came on, the place would go bananas. And when she left, the place would go bananas. And she let that happen. She, you see, I used to be a little more brusque on stage and leave right away after a stand-up set, because I remember Elvis Costello, when I saw him in like 1978, they didn't even take a bow, they ran off. And I've changed my mind entirely about that now. And I believe that you have to let that love exist. You have to let them love it. And by doing that, you're doing them a favor. Like, you see someone in person, like Robin Williams is the closest I can think of. Robin was a shy guy, and people would go bananas just being around him. Just the idea of him in the building was enough to drive audiences absolutely over the brink. And he had that beautiful capacity to accept it, and Sean Connery, who I've met briefly, and I had lunch with him once, and a bunch of people. I wasn't the only one. And Jennifer's seen him.
We didn't need to know that detail.
Right. Jennifer's seen him in Scotland, right? He's from Edinburgh, where he drove a milk float, which is a milk wagon, in the 50s, before he was a bodybuilder and a male model, and then he became an actor.
And
Sean
a better
Connery,
James Bond than the previously mentioned guy.
Sean Connery, believe it or not, has a brother that looks almost exactly like him. And this was 15, 20 years ago at the film festival in Scotland. I had a gig, of course, but Jennifer went to see The Man Who Would Be King with Sean Connery and Michael Caine. And Michael Caine got up first, and the Scottish people gave him a very, very, nice round of applause. And then Michael Caine said, and now, ladies and gentlemen, the President of Scotland. And Jennifer said Sean Connery stood there, and the audience jumped up and applauded for 10 minutes, right? Screaming, crying, tearing their hair out, screaming for him. And he stood there like this.
And
at the end of it, he went, it was nothing.
Yes. That's why he's the best James Bond.
He has that charisma.
That is terrific.
I went to see my friend Mike McShane played Friar Tuck in Kevin Costner's Robin Hood. And Sean Connery came to the set one day and shot the part of King Richard. So I was lucky enough to eat lunch with them. At the end of the day, McShane turns to Sean Connery and goes, Mr. Connery, it was a real pleasure working with you. And Sean Connery was still in the King outfit, turned to me and Mike and went, "Oh, bye-bye." And we were high-fiving each other and humping each other the whole way home. Like humping each other. Sean Connery was electric in person.
Wow.
6'3". Yes, Kevin, what was the name of that second AD on the Untouchables? He had it. David Bowie, I think, to some extent. Prince.
Yeah.
Aretha Franklin. You know, the magic of some stars isn't even if that they're talented or that they're perfect or anything. They're imperfect, but they let you love them.
Yep.
It's so key. It's so key. Like with Sly, I don't know, you know. I think Sly had that capacity for a really long time, and then he didn't want it anymore, or something changed in him. It all turned, right?
I think that's what changed. I think that's what changed.
Yeah, he might be. I mean, I think if he was a young kid today, he'd be on the spectrum. You know, they try to understand what was going on because he doesn't want that attention. He's
not anymore. But think of him from like 1967 to like 1975 or whatever.
Yeah.
When he was the center of the show, and he got married at Madison Square Garden. I mean, he had the capacity to let the world in on his most intimate shit for a really long time. And he's so offhand on talk shows.
Well, before he was Sly Stone, the singer and the leader of Sly and the Family Stone, he was Sly Stone, the DJ at KSOL.
Yeah, man.
So,
and he was a DJ.
And he led shows and, emceed things. And so, yeah, he did have the capacity to be loved at one point. And I really think that's kind of what changed, what clicked over for him. So, hey, we've had you for greater than an hour, and we really appreciate you doing this with us. And we could do it all day. But what I would like to say before you go, oh, I'm late for something, I got to go. Will you please put some love on Jennifer for us? And
I will.
There's two things that I want to say, and then I'll let Pete close up. But first, anytime that you would like to both do the show, that would be amazing fun.
Oh, awesome.
So you have an open invitation. And then I'm going to get your number, and I'm going to call you twice a year just to say hi and tell you how much I love you.
All right, baby.
Okay.
And I love you guys. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure today, just like last time.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, I'm going to sign off here.
Okay,
right,
sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, darlings.